Welcome to Tactical Talk. This is Zain. Today, the topic of our show is Iran's role in the Syrian civil war. Today, the guest of our show is Matthew Brodsky, who is a senior fellow at the Security Studies Group. He was previously the director of policy for the Washington, D.C.-based think tank, the Jewish Policy Center. Welcome to our show, Matthew Brodsky. This is Zain Khan. It's a pleasure to have you on Tactical Talk.
Great to be with you.
Matthew, let's get to the first question. Iran and Syria are close strategic allies. What support has Iran provided to the Syrians?
Iran has provided a lot of support. They see keeping Assad in power as a major strategic objective, and it's essential given Iran's own strategic ambitions in the region. So the support was immediate once Assad was first on the ropes in March 2011. It started out with some advising and training, even though they had already long had a small presence within Syria. And then by 2013, it became the open support of Hezbollah in the fighting itself. Of course, they did that fighting during 2012, but they publicly accepted the responsibility or admitted that they were doing so in 2013. And throughout the year 2013, 2014, Iran went in with ground forces. We're talking the Revolutionary Guards. They even sent in some of their own regular armed forces from the army in order to help prop up the Assad regime. So they've really been providing the ground force protection that has kept Assad afloat throughout the years.
Matthew, you've mentioned logistical, financial, and training, but what do you mean by training? Which groups has Iran been training for Syria?
Well, there's a huge amount of groups that undergo name changes frequently when you're talking about the Syria context, but there are local defense forces that they've come up with, which is basically they've had Hezbollah and the IRGC become, transfer their tactical and organizational expertise onto local Shia militias. So they're trying to, what Iran would like to do is create a replica of the Hezbollah model that it currently has in Lebanon. So they're doing that in Syria with various local militias that they have trained. Obviously, they prefer that there be Shia, but they've created, say, in southern Syria, a Brigade 313, which is supposed to be another Hezbollah cookie cutter type of model. And they're not entirely Shia. Some of them are drawn from the Christian communities and from Israel. So there's many different forms that they have there. Quwat al-Rida, Liwa al-Mukhtar, al-Ghalibun. There's several that they use and employ throughout the country, and that's just the local forces, because these are designed to be to stay behind and represent Iran's interests if Iran has to pull out at some point. And this, of course, is also in addition to all of the Hashd al-Shabi, other paramilitary units that Iran uses that are from Iraq primarily.
Okay, let's get to a very tricky question. What role do those Iranian trained proxy groups play in Syria? Who do they actually fight?
They fight rebel groups primarily. I mean, they're fighting on behalf of Iran, which is fighting on behalf of the regime. So they are fighting to preserve the Assad order. So it depends in which areas they are. There are different rebel groups located in the south than there are in, say, the Idlib province or out in the eastern reaches of Syria. But they're all fighting on behalf of Iran and to preserve Assad's order. And this is what they've been up to for a long time. I mean, it helps that Iran has more resources and can pay for it. So money buys you loyalty if ideology does not.
Matthew, Iran is gaining more influence in the Middle East. Does the U.S. and its allies see this as a potential threat?
Absolutely. The United States sees it as a threat. It's something that the new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, just laid out in a speech very recently. So really, their actions on the ground, Iran throughout the Middle East, was something that was separate from the nuclear deal that was struck up between the Obama administration, European powers, and China and Russia and Iran. Now, the United States has scrapped that deal and has vowed to push back on Iran's nefarious activities throughout the region, including its nuclear program, but also elsewhere in the region where it is currently controlling the capitals in Lebanon, in Syria, as we've been discussing, but also in Iraq, as the election has further cemented Iran's position there. The United States has yet to, however, to connect that to a operable plan of action, and specifically in Syria, they have not. For right now, it seems as though they're willing to allow Israel to enforce its own red lines, which will continue to look after them, and that includes bombing Iran and its militias and the bases, the intelligence positions, and the missiles that they are importing and transferring into Syria in order to keep and create the land bridge that Iran has long sought. So for Iran, what they've really been after for decades is to secure what is their greatest achievement, which is Hezbollah in Lebanon. So they're creating these land corridors that run through Iraq and through Syria into Lebanon, into the Mediterranean Sea. So right now, the only thing that is standing in between their way is the United States presence and the militias that they're supporting in eastern Syria, though the United States might withdraw soon. And Israel and Jordan, who have said that they won't allow this to happen. So we're bound to see a face-off and a different shifting of the footing of the war in Syria, away from a civil war and more to Iran versus Israel in Syria.
Okay, but according to your research, does Iran plan to expand its influence further into the Middle East? What is its goals in the Middle East?
Well, what it wants to do is consolidate and expand its political, religious, and economic and cultural spheres of influence. This has been a part of exporting the revolution, which is the entire point since 1979 of what the Iranian regime has sought to do. And of course, Hezbollah in Lebanon, as I mentioned, has given them the greatest input in the heart of the Middle East, and to present and to basically to further present their military power in the heart of the region. So, as I said, keeping their logistical lines open to there has been a number one priority. For them, this is going to continue because, again, this is the whole purpose of their revolution, is to export it. Now, at the same time, we also have to realize that they've been able to make a significant amount of their gains throughout the decades as a result of being opportunistic. That is to say, they've taken advantage of the fall of Saddam Hussein. So the United States can chalk that up as a mistake if geopolitically they were to see Iran as their greater rival. So they've been able to take over the Iraqi government essentially right now. They've done the same elsewhere. So when the opportunity presents itself, they've been able to step in and take advantage. On the other side, the Gulf Arab states and the more pragmatic Sunni Arab powers have not altogether stood as one to face the Iranian challenge. And of course, that can be seen through their support from very different groups inside of Syria. I mean, we have to remember Syria is by vast majority, some 75% Sunni, against, throughout the civil war, the minority Alawi population represented by Assad, and kept up by the Shia, of course, being Iran. If the Sunnis were actually able to unite and unify, they would be much better positioned to resist what Iran is doing. But Iran has made the most out of its opportunities, and the Sunni states, unfortunately, have not.
Okay, Matthew, according to your opinion and according to your research, and this is our last question, how does the U.S. and its allies plan to deal with the growing Iranian influence within the Middle East, which they perceive to be a threat?
Well, this we're going to see. It now seems that whereas President Obama had a nuclear deal that was quite separate from any of Iran's actions, which in my belief was a tragic mistake, the new administration now has announced that any nuclear deal that it moves toward is going to be a part of also dealing with Iran's behavior throughout the region, its support for terrorism, its human rights record, and its further work on ballistic missiles programs, which of course is designed to carry a nuclear payload. It's not designed to just shoot rockets thousands of miles just to make a small explosion somewhere. So wrapping these all together seems to be part of the new and unfolding President Trump plan. What it looks like to be immediately is to create a lot of pressure through sanctions on the regime so that it has to face very difficult choices, such as it can keep paying for its foreign adventurism, but it's going to continue to really annoy its population, which has been increasingly on the streets and against the regime, specifically because they have not received anything as a result of the nuclear deal that was signed and the billions of dollars that went to the regime in Tehran. Much of that money, if not the vast majority, has been spent on these missile programs and its foreign adventures. So the United States hopes to put it in a very difficult position, as it had in 2011, 2012, 2013. This was back when the United States had deep sanctions behind the United Nations Security Council as well, and it brought Iran to the table to negotiate the nuclear program. So I think the plan is now to do the same, tighten the screws on Iran, bring them back to the table, but make a deal that is more advantageous to the United States and its allies, and not to the regime. And if the regime should fall in the meantime, I'm pretty sure that the United States would be pretty fine with that as well.
Thank you so much, Matthew Brodsky, for being on Tactical Talk. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much.
This was Matthew Brodsky, a senior fellow at the Security Studies Group. We were discussing Iran's role in the Syrian civil war. Until the next episode of Tactical Talk, this is Zain. Take care and goodbye.